morning, everyone. The last time I was on a stage like this was 30 years ago. And I was in a school play and had a tiny role and forgot all the 5 words that I had to say. So I promised myself never to set foot on a stage again unless I had a story that it was impossible for me to forget. So here we go. Once upon a time, there were 2 young people. Her name was Anna, and she was from the United Kingdom. And his name was Piero, and he was from Italy. They've both been looking for jobs. They've been looking for a long, long time, years in fact. They started out looking for the job of their dreams. Now, they'd settle for anything since they can't find the job for which they're qualified. They have good degrees and beautiful CVs. They've been to interviews, dozens of interviews. And they've been told, you don't have the right degree, or the right skill set, or the right attitude. They've been told they're overqualified or underqualified. They have too much experience or not enough experience. For one reason or another, they're not what the market wants. Now, they're told it's the economy. It's the Eurozone crisis. It's the times we live in. So for influential people like the author of American Psycho, Bret Easton Ellis, they're part of Generation Wuss. For many, many others, they're part of another lost generation. So where did Anna and Piero go wrong? Now, Piero did what his father wanted. So he went to university to read law because a law degree is going to land him a well-paid job. Now, he's part of the 200,000 people in Italy with a law degree, most of whom are struggling to find jobs on a market that could potentially accommodate 20,000 graduates. So the ones who do have good jobs and drive nice cars are much older than Piero and not about to retire. So Piero lives at home with his parents in his teenage bedroom and works as a barista. His girlfriend lives with her parents. Neither of them can afford to move out or start a family. They are both deadlocked in adolescence, knocking on the door of adulthood. Anna, on the other hand, had a passion. She always wanted to be a midwife. Great news, because there's a shortage of midwives in the UK. But while Anna powers through a specialist training course as fast as she can, the country is making up for the shortfall by retraining nurses, hiring recent graduates, or by buying up midwives from all over the world through immigration. And Anna doesn't have a life outside her studies because she's telling herself being an A student is going to make it all worth it. But by the time she graduates, there may not be a job waiting for her. She may have studied herself into a corner. Now, Anna and Piero are fictional characters. I made them up. I'm a novelist, that's what I do. But I make people up based on real human experience, and Anna's and Piero's stories are very common. I imagined them while doing research for my creative writing PhD, for which I'm writing a novel about the overeducated and unemployed young people in Europe. And for me, the tragedy of youth unemployment is graduate unemployment. I became interested in this topic because I grew up in Ceausescu's Romania, which was the North Korea of Eastern Europe, where the narrative of zero unemployment and jobs for all was an unquestionable truth for decades. There was a perfect match between the education supply and the labor market, all coordinated by one central planning agency that ensured that all graduates had jobs. And then it all fell apart when the revolution happened in '89 and long-held beliefs crumbled. Freedom of choice and competition entered the mantra playlist directly at number 1. Jobs for all got pushed out. The market took over. The market dictated. The market wanted you or not. I left my country 12 years ago and worked in about 10 countries, and everywhere I went, I met people like Anna and Piero. Everywhere I went, youth unemployment was on the rise, and with it, overeducation and underemployment. What fascinated me the most was how consistent the stories about the pandemic of youth unemployment were, not only across countries, but also across economic cycles. Education for employability, a phrase at the core of EU discourse, is the Procrustean bed from Greek mythology on which young people's choices are measured, and when they are found wanting, they are bullied and blamed. There is no doubt that youth unemployment is the biggest problem of my generation, and part of it may just be because of what we talk about when we talk about youth unemployment. So here's a number of fields of study. Each of them has a different angle of research on youth unemployment, but we, the public, get a remarkably narrow view through the lens of economics and the use of one metric, the youth unemployment rate, which is a measure that, this one slide's missing, no problem. Which is a measure which is used in a standardized way across the globe and charts the share of young people aged 15 to 24 who are economically active, looking for a job, and who cannot find one. Now, there are three problems with this picture. The first one is the definition of youth. The second one is the definition of unemployment. And the third one is the time frame for such a measure. So this particular time frame has been questioned ever since the beginning when it was introduced. And there are a number of reasons why it has been questioned, but fundamentally it ignores cultural differences among countries when it comes to their youth population and their different rites of passage. Also, it assumes that economies are equally youth-friendly, and therefore a 16-year-old in Italy and one in the UK have the same economic opportunities. So the degree of participation on the labor market is comparable. But how youth-friendly are really these labor markets? Let's take a look at youth employment trends in the UK and Italy in the past 15 years. Now, if you look at these two peaks here, you can see that Italy employed 1.6 million young people aged 15 to 24 in its most successful year. So nearly 1 in 3 young people had jobs, whereas the UK employed consistently 1 in 2 of its young people and peaked in 2002 with 4 million jobs. So what you hear all the time is comparisons between southern and northern countries. So Italy is expected to create jobs that it never had in the first place, rather than comparing each country with the best image of itself. So what do we talk about when we talk about youth unemployment? Mainly, we get our information from the media. So there are 2 angles for this. One of them is a straightforward comparison of youth unemployment rates. This one shows you a big gap between the Italian youth unemployment rate at 40% and the British one at 20%. The second angle is when these rates get interpreted as shares of the entire youth population. So for instance, we have here Italy youth unemployment at 42.7%, and here the 20% UK youth unemployment rate interpreted as 1 in 5 young people without a job. Now, let's look at actual numbers. So, in 2013, there were 0.9 million 15 to 24-year-olds young people in the UK officially unemployed, versus 0.6 million in Italy. That's 12% officially unemployed in the UK versus 11% in Italy. And if you look at the trends, you see that Italy ratio decreased since 2000, while the UK one increased by 50% since 2000. So which is it? Is youth unemployment worse in Italy or in the UK? Here's where the second problem with the definition comes in, the definition of unemployment. We think of unemployment as one big category, meaning temporarily out of work. But what the official definition means is two separate categories. One is the economically active, officially unemployed, and the other one are the not in education, no employment, the so-called NEETs, who are considered economically inactive. Now, despite the theoretical division, both these categories share the state of joblessness. So if we take joblessness to mean the real face of youth unemployment, we see that there are 1.9 million 15 to 24-year-olds out of work, both in Italy and the UK. That's 1 in 3 in Italy and 1 in 4 in the UK. Now, when it comes to action, the third problem with the definition comes in, the time frame. Because the youth unemployment rates provide a snapshot in time. And the 15 to 24-year-old category has traditionally been the most dynamic on the labor market, with one person moving through the 4 states of not in education or employment, education, unemployed, unemployed, within 1 year. But if we look at the urgency with which the EU allocated 6 billion euro to the Youth Employment Initiative, nearly 2 years since its launch, we realize that many young people have fallen through the cracks. Some have migrated, some have grown out of the age group, some have moved into education, some have become overeducated, and some have found employment. So when we go on and fund employment programs without having a comprehensive understanding of youth unemployment, we should be less puzzled when such programs fail. There are 2 solutions that Anna and Piero constantly hear about. One of them is the skills gap. So now, Piero is told after he graduated and he can't find a job, he's told you should have pursued a vocational degree rather than a university education. Now, can there ever be a perfect match between the education supply and the market demand when the higher education system is a branch of a country's industry subject to market rules? Hypothetically, we could end up with a country of lawyers and architects, as Italy is pretty much now. The second narrative is the superiority of the German model over any other. Now, Anna in the UK hears this all the time, and this has happened since the 80s. It's always the same, it's conventional wisdom. But if we go back to the youth employment trends and we plot Germany in blue line, you can see that the UK employment trends have consistently been better, obviously compared to Italy, but also compared to Germany. We never hear about it, we always hear about the German model. And here's the question: can any country adopt the German dual education system without adopting the German economic structure? Now, the crux of the matter is that we need a data revolution when it comes to youth unemployment. We need multidisciplinary research and we need better statistics. First of all, we need culturally sensitive youth definitions. Who says youth must be 15 to 24-year-olds around the world? Because the definition excludes graduates, we don't know what happens with graduate unemployment unless it's patchy and it's not consistent. We can't really rely on the consistency of the youth unemployment rate. Now, it will be very messy, to compare culturally sensitive statistics, obviously, but at least we'd get a real picture of what youth unemployment means in every context, and comparing real pictures would hopefully lead to more than North versus South performance narratives that are simply counterproductive. The second thing that we need is better information about the supply chain between education and the labor market. Because one major assumption is that young people are rational beings who make career decisions based on return on investment calculations in light of perfect information about the market. Can we own up to the fact that we don't have perfect information about the market, but we could have if we invested more in multidisciplinary research and how research is communicated, because labor market statistics are cryptic to young people. Our current statistics and support mechanisms have failed people like Anna and Piero. They're 26, so they are on the wrong side of youth statistics. Piero has the wrong degree, Anna has the right one, but she may be a couple of years too late. By the time they finish the education, they were already standardized products. So standardization may be the key to a well-oiled global market, but in the case of mass youth unemployment, differentiation may just be the key. Except that Anna and Piero don't have enough information to know how they are positioned on the labor market, and without it, they don't know where they belong. And I speak about differentiation because that's my heritage. I grew up in the 90s in Romania in the midst of socioeconomic upheaval. And I did not need a perfect setup to make it. I grew up without a computer, with access to a small town library and some great teachers in one of the poorest countries in Europe. I read more than anyone else around me because I always ask myself, if I take in the same information as everyone else, what makes me different? But I never looked at education as a golden ticket for a job. I look at the necessity for self-development as a lifetime project. I rarely had a job that I knew existed when I graduated, but I found great mentors or they found me. The most precious gift anyone can give to you is the gift of time. If you can find people who can advise you on what you can become, you've won the lottery. Do it formally, do it informally, just do it. Stop waiting for those misleading youth unemployment statistics to result in employment programs that work for you. Start asking for better data so that the next time we talk about youth unemployment, we all talk about the same thing.